My name is Mary Reed, and I'm interviewing Alan Cornette at his home studio in Slade, Kentucky. Today is Thursday, June 12, 2025. This interview is part of the Kentucky Craft History and Education Association's mission to document and preserve the development and the ongoing impact of crafts in Kentucky. Our videographer is Daniel Coy. Okay. So, Al, thank you for allowing us to come and do this interview with you.
Thank you.
Okay. I'd like to start out by you telling us something about yourself, where you were born, maybe when and where you were born, and your maybe something of your family raising.
It's a long story. To begin with, you called me at the wrong time. I've been to 3 different dentists lately, and I ended up with these front teeth being pulled. And I'm at an age where I don't know, I don't want to spend thousands of dollars to put implants in.
Not.
So I may get me an old pirate-looking hat and have this tooth thing character going and let her go, you know. But I was born in Boyd County, Kentucky, up near Ashland, about 3 miles out of Ashland on Route 5. Going towards a place called Summit. That's where my grade school was, and Boyd County High School is on the outpost. It's out towards I-64 now, and Cannonsburg. That's where I went to high school. But I got when I came back from the service, I guess what happened. Well, it is a weird story. I was a musician one time too. A friend of mine said, "I'll get you buy you a guitar, and we'll get us a band together." That's okay. I didn't know the difference between a chord and a fret, you know. I got me a D18 Martin, and one of my stories is about that Martin guitar. But,
all right.
I forgot my chain of thought now.
What year were you born?
1931.
1931.
Way back there.
That makes you what, 94?
I'm 3 months away from 94, October 4th.
Amazing.
It is. Well, my mother was like a month being 100. Her mother was 101.
Jeez.
Her father was 99 when he died. So I thankfully got some of her genes, I think. That helps. But I've tried to stay active in as much as possible, because I believe you've got to keep moving. You can't sit on the couch and waste your life away, really.
Yeah. Did you have siblings?
Had 2 brothers and 2 sisters.
And where'd you fall in that?
I was in the middle. That's why I'm a Libra. I'm all balanced out. I had a younger and older brother and younger and older sister. So I had to be a Libra. My mother was 31 when she had me, in 1931. And I was born on the 4th, and that's a 31. If you get into numerology, you say, well, you know, I'm a big 4 person, and I had to be. I had to be a Libra, maybe because of when I was born there. But it's kind of interesting. There's probably nothing to it, but Edgar Casey said there was 25% maybe accurate about that. You know, Edgar Casey.
Yeah, I know Casey. I've read a lot of his books.
So there's some truth in many things. And
yeah.
Probably more lies and more things than we think, you know.
I think there's a little truth to everything.
Yeah. But, well, that was my age.
Yeah.
What happened, I thought I could sing, and people, I think, started throwing things at me.
Oh.
So I had a friend, he said, "Al, go to school on his GI Bill," and I hadn't really thought about it, and I ended up going to Eastern on the GI Bill, and graduated in 59.
So after high school, you went into the Army?
Yeah, I went to the Army 2 years in Panama, of all places. That was during the Korean War, 1950, right after I graduated out of high school. And lucky me, they sent our whole company to Panama to guard that canal, right in the middle of that war, and I was always thankful for that. My mother was too. But then I came back and got into this music thing, and I was a carpenter with my dad at the time. He was a carpenter, and that's one reason I ended up with woodworking, I think, and building things. But I got involved in that, and the band thing didn't work out. What happened? When I came out of Eastern, I went to
Now, when
Parker.
did you go to Eastern?
55 through 59, I guess.
Okay.
Class of 59 anyway. And
What'd you study?
industrial arts. That was woodworking. That was the days they had the old shop teachers.
Yeah.
And that day's gone now, by the way. When I came out of there, I went to work for Parker Seal Company in Lexington.
Okay.
And they were my first experience with a corporation or large companies.
Right.
And I didn't like that too well. And then I got a job at Jesamine County High School teaching shop. They helped set up their first shop in a new high school in Jesamine County, and that didn't last too long either. That's another story. They put freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors in on me, and some of them wanted to learn something. 2 or 3 of them did, and I think the rest were just putting in time. And it almost drove me nuts, really. I wanted to do bad things to the boys, and I knew I couldn't hit them. But I ended up 1 year teaching, and that's when I stumbled into IBM, broke, hungry, and tired, and they hired me as a technical illustrator because of my artistic talent, I guess. So I ended up doing technical illustrations of machine parts, exploded views for parts catalogs. I did that for 5 years, and that's when I got into the audio-visual work, and we did a little old movie, a couple of little small movies. We had an old Aeroflex 35 millimeter. I think they used it in the Army, World War II, the Aeroflex camera. We used that thing to make a couple of instructional movies. But mostly it was taking pictures of those machines to be used in instruction manuals and parts catalogs. And that was a time when they had me running around all over the place, in New York and Chicago, and looking for some way of giving a viewer that this guy could carry around in the field working on machines and look at a microfiche and finding a part number. That was a real problem. We wanted to get away from carrying big books all the time.
Oh.
But at that period of time, a little be known, well, I suspected it, but a couple of managers didn't. There's another guy working in there that was working on computers, and they come up with that computer came along, and we forgot about microfiche. That was a big deal, as you might remember that in the libraries.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that technology left as soon as that computer came along. It was weird. They had a machine that, it was a punch card machine, I believe. A monster machine that
Key punch.
they sent me another fellow over in their experiment lab to see what it would take to get into it, to draw it and explode it where you could see the parts. And they had this machine. It was all mechanical just about. And this one little dude came from New York or somewhere and went in a back room down in Lexington and spent about a month or two. And he came up with this box that did the same thing.
Wow.
And you could just pick it up with one hand almost, electronic. So that machine never surfaced. I don't know whatever happened to the thing. They spent years developing that big fancy machine, and electronics destroyed it. But that was what was happening in the computer industry. And I was a part
Computers
of that
started
too.
out very big.
Yeah.
And look at them now. They're in the palm of your hand or on your wrist.
Yeah. You know, what this watch does with this phone, it's a computer with a phone app, really.
Yeah. Exactly. On that. So how long were you with IBM?
About 12 years, I think,
12
13.
years.
I left there in 75, and 63, 64, I think, when I started.
Okay. And what came next?
Well, I moved up here. My wife agreed to come up here, and she hated it up here, I think. She wanted, bless her heart, she was from Carter County. I had to ford a creek when I met her, you know, little country gal, and she didn't want anything to do with country again, maybe. You know, I'd give that to her, but then she left, and I ended up here by myself since 74, I guess. She was here in 73 when they moved up. And she ended up in Florida and in Houston later with my son. And that's Odyssey also, a story, you know.
So when you moved here, you had your children moved here with you, or were they grown?
My son, bless his heart too, he was 16, and I did a terrible thing to him in a way. I pulled him away from all his buddies at Bryan Station High School. I didn't realize the impact that would have on him. And he also had a problem with the school system here, and very conservative, and he couldn't even talk in a chow line in the cafeteria. It was that kind of setup. And he ended up going to Lexington, just dropped out of high school. He later got into Lexington Community College, and that's a long story too. He called me one day and said, "Hey, Dad, guess where I am?" I said, "I know where you are, West." He could be in Timbuktu, you know. He said, "I'm in Houston." I said, "Houston? Are you sleeping under a bridge by any chance?" Because at that time there was a lot of people leaving Akron, Ohio, and up in Chicago going south because jobs were hard to find. And Houston's still growing, that area. And he ended up down there in the import business, and he done a lot better than I did as far as money goes. Sometimes you just can't follow the standard way of living. You know, he didn't fit in, and he was like me maybe, and he ended up traveling all over the world in different places doing that kind of job. And he's finally retired. He retired at 47, got a little bit of real estate, and then got into collecting motorcycles, I think. He lives over in Richmond now.
He's in Richmond now?
He lived in Arizona while the Sedona area, and man, that was an experience for me because I got into finding petroglyphs, rock art, and they were all over the place in the Southwest. So I got to look around out there while he was living out there, and he moved to Phoenix after that for about 8 or 10 years. And that's when he moved back to Richmond, Madison County. Okay. So he's back home in a way. And gosh, he's 67, I guess. 60. I can't believe my son is that old.
It makes you feel old when you realize how old your kids are.
Yep.
Yeah. So you're sitting in a beautiful willow chair, and there's this one next to you that you've painted on. How did you get into building willow?
Well, I had problems. I was doing realistic work with my reproductions and art, and the guild would not approve me to exhibit. The realistic work is nothing, you know. And at that time, that type of thing was controlled by UK and people in the upper echelons of PhDs that taught art in colleges. Okay. You know more about that than I do, but at that time it was just, and I was into.
Let me stop you for a minute. Let's back up just a second. So when you moved here, you were basically unemployed. How did you
I was working at IBM. I drove back and forth.
You drove back and forth. Okay. So you were still working at IBM. 2
years almost. Yeah.
Okay.
And 75 is when I left IBM.
Okay. So then, when you quit IBM, how did you transition into the arts or support yourself?
I knew I could make a living, support myself with reproductions. That frame panel, that little.
Okay.
It's not a print. It's a reproduction, and that's why I got in trouble academically. They said it's not a print. The artist didn't print it. You know, there's that type of thing going on.
Oh, okay.
And because I was painting realistically, they didn't want me in the guild either. Russell May went down there too. You know Russell?
Yeah, I did.
Now, he come back home. He was actually had tears in his eyes. See, they wouldn't accept him. It destroyed him. But I got into other things along that time, and that might have been the time. Somehow I got exposed to, maybe in books or something, on these willow furniture.
Yeah.
And I knew a fellow that there was a fellow sold them beside the road on old Route 60 when I drove to Eastern, and I remember him. He painted those chairs of different colors, and he made probably for his kids. It wasn't fancy like this. It was rustic willow furniture, you know.
Okay.
And that's probably what got me started. And I knew I was in an art group in West Liberty at the time, and there was all kinds of this willow growing around. in these creek beds, and I was healthy enough to get out and gather it. You know, it's pretty hard to walk around in muddy creeks and swamps and carry a bundle of willow out. You know, select the ones you need, like a large piece and a small piece. You just don't go cut a bunch of willows and then figure out what you're going to do with it. You know, and that was 77. I don't know when. I don't know, around the 80s, I guess, 1980s, early 80s. Okay. I started building these. I'm not sure now. No, this one was 2002, I think. 2001 and 2002 when I made these. You might get a wasp or something buzzing around you.
Yeah, I see.
Don't swat at them, they'll be all right, they just leave. But maybe he likes that willow.
Probably.
I did find that more bugs really like it, especially when it's green. And there's one little powder post beetle gets into it, and they get down a little white powder you've seen in furniture.
They ate my root cellar.
Yeah, they will. They'll destroy it.
We had to rebuild it in cedar.
Well, I did a couple of chairs and I turned them upside down outside and took a little bit of gas, and those little beetles have a little pinhead hole. And that gas is the only thing that would soak and penetrate and kill those little rascals. And I'd let it sit there about 4 or 5 days so the smell wouldn't be there. And I got rid of them that way in a couple of chairs. And about that time, I think I got out of them because it's getting harder to find a willow and bugs were eating them up.
So did you make pieces of furniture other than just chairs, or in the willow? In the willow.
I majored in industrial arts in school. I had a nice chest of drawers here I made when I was a senior.
I'm talking about willow furniture.
Oh, okay. Well, this is all that one era there for about 4, 5, 6 years. I didn't make anything else out of willow prior to that.
You didn't make tables or benches, just the big chairs?
Not out of willow, no.
Yeah, okay. I think I first met you at a guild fair out at Indian Fort in Berea. And you would build the chairs, you would demonstrate and build chairs there.
I forgot the date of that. It was in the 80s, I guess.
I don't remember.
No, it was probably up in the 90s or late 90s. If this one's 2002.
It could have been
this
more
is sort of
in
like
the 90s.
a culmination of my career. So I was building them maybe the late 90s.
So you eventually got juried into the guild? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
On your furniture?
God, I haven't seen her moment. The little gal that done pottery at Harrodsburg, she had a pottery. She moved to Lexington after that. I forgot her name. She was on the board that approved. Okay, and I knew her. And bless her heart, she argued with, I won't mention his name, but he didn't like these chairs because one of them wasn't slanted enough. And they're uncomfortable. And I tried to tell her, it's not a chair, it's a work of art. You can forget about the chair thing, you know. But she helped me get okayed into the guild for that reason. Okay. That's when I went down there 2 or 3 years in a row and we're making them down there. That was fun for me, actually. I like to build things like that and like it's like a painting, really. See what happens in the end. You don't know exactly what you're going to end up with, see. So that's what's thrilling about writing a book, writing a poem, building furniture, anything really. Making videos.
So did you teach other people how to make your furniture, or?
I tried to get one guy interested, and I think he didn't want to work. He didn't want to get out and get his feet muddy or something. You know, it was one of those things, and I just gave up. And if somebody would have asked me, I would gladly brought him up here and made one right in front of him. Here's what you have to do. I wouldn't care to do that. Other people keep their little things a secret, you know, but I've never been that way. I've tried to teach people to paint, and they've got to have some kind of talent and a desire to do things, or they don't.
It looks like you kind of build a framework and then you fill it in.
Yeah, you got to build a frame.
Okay.
And I experimented with that. You got to find these two pieces with a curve,
Oh.
So it's curved back.
Huh.
This piece right here, if you took them out, they've got a big curve to them.
Okay.
So you find those in the field for the big part, and these other big parts, and you put it all together in a little chair without any seat or anything in it. Then all you got to do is wrap these things around the chair and in different ways. To me, it was simple to make one, and I looked at images that in a book that several books, I guess, people had built them this way.
And you worked with green wood?
Yeah. It has to be green.
Did you ever have to steam anything?
Once it dries out, it don't bend too easy.
Okay.
You can almost make a circle out of it when it's wet, a little small one. I took some to the creek thinking I could soak them, and they bend, and I went down, I don't know, a month or two later, and I couldn't bend them. They had been soaking in that creek. So.
Okay. So then that limits the season that you can build furniture or build a chair?
Well, no, you could actually collect this in the wintertime. In spring, the sap is up, and it might shrink a little bit more in that time.
Oh, okay.
A matter of fact, it's a good question. I tell people, I told them when I sold it, to check it for 2 or 3 months after they put it in the house and make sure, and just snug these screws up. These didn't need it, but if it's in springtime, you might have to snug all the screws up where it's solid again.
Okay, so you've screwed it together then.
Yeah. Yeah, these things are screwed in. It's not nailed. I use little nails along here to keep these things together. And when they dry, they'll stay that way, you know.
Okay. Well, I love that you have a hand-painted and carved panel in the back of this one. Really sets it apart from...
Well, that's where I work my art into the chair thing. And my carving, too. I've carved a few things, not a tremendous amount of carving. That's a time-consuming thing, too.
Yes, very much so. Okay.
I carved 2 or 3 a winged globe, an Egyptian winged globe. You've seen that symbol, and people like that.
Yeah. So, tell us about your painting, your artwork, your 2D work.
The oil paintings?
Your oil paintings, yeah. So you use oils and not acrylics?
Yeah, I experimented with acrylics, and it's convenient to be able to wash your brushes out with water. But I got into the oils, and acrylics dried too quick for me. I'm the kind of guy that I shouldn't tell this, but I went back more than once in an oil painting and took a palette knife and took off some paint and then painted it again because I didn't like the way it turned out. But you couldn't do that with acrylics. It's always dried, and then you just messed it up trying to, you know, but on a small thing. I didn't do that with any big thing, but every now and then I'd take the knife and pick up the oils and then kind of smooth it out and do it again, right on the canvas or the board. And I didn't get into painting until I got into Eastern, and I took an art class, and I almost changed my major to an art major, but I knew for some reason, maybe somebody told me, you're not going to make much money as an artist. And I'm glad I didn't change it, but I would have run out of money, and the GI Bill wouldn't have covered that maybe.
Right.
That kind of thing, and I went ahead and stayed in industrial arts. But that art class kind of fired me up too, and it gave me some basic stuff. And I took one in ceramics too, and that's kind of a creative thing. And I felt like I wanted to create things rather than try to teach kids things. I shouldn't have felt that way, but I had to be true to myself, and you know how that goes.
Yes,
you just can't force yourself to do something you don't like, you know.
Yeah. So, with your paintings, are you represented by someone? Do you do exhibits? How do you display and sell your work?
I went through that too with my prints, and I remember one gallery in Indiana wanted to sign up with me. They're going to Indianapolis. I forgot who they were now, but I had to sign my life away, and I could not go down the road and sell anything to anybody, even here in my local community. And I said, well, I don't like the idea of of legally tying myself up that way. A good friend of mine in the mountains did the same thing in the gallery in New York, and he's not with them anymore. It's kind of hard. They want the gal up the road to run the art store wants 40% commission, see? So you're trying to get 500 or 1,000 out of a painting, suddenly you got to put 1,500 on it if you're going to pay half of it to somebody else, you know?
Right.
It became that kind of thing, and I got to the point where I couldn't get out and run around anyway and exhibit. It just physically too much, you know. So I put my work in the coffee shop up here going to the park, and I sold 7 paintings last year.
Wow.
2 or 3 out of that
Nice.
shop, and Facebook. I've sold 2 or 3 because of Facebook, so I don't need an agent.
Good.
If somebody would come by here and Allie give me 10,000 for each painting, I might go for that, but and let them charge what they want, you know.
Right.
But I'm very careful about getting tied up legally that way. Most anybody should be that way, you know. I don't know. I've lost track of that last question you asked about the art.
I think you've answered it. Have you had any solo exhibits?
Well, the Guild had a show in Mount Sterling, and that's been 4 or 5 years ago, though. And that was a pretty nice show. They have a real nice old church over there in Mount Sterling. And,
Yes.
You might have been over there. The Guild sponsored it, or had to work over there, and I was over there with them. I had, I think, 1 painting in it.
Okay.
And I was on the board of, approval there for a little while. And that's not an easy job either, telling someone that it's not good enough, you know.
In other words, you were a juror.
Yeah.
That's tough.
Yeah. Well, one fella come in there with really nice woodworking furniture, beefy stuff, but he didn't sand it. All those kind of saw marks and sand marks all over his furniture he'd finished. And you'd say, man, you just got to take the scratch marks out, you know. And he was kind of upset, and me and the other fellow had to reject him, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I never wanted that kind of a job. I wouldn't want to be a judge either. It's kind of hard. It is hard.
Yeah.
Being fair to everybody.
Right.
But that's part of growing up, you know.
Yeah.
What happened, initially, realistic work was nothing. They didn't want to touch that. I could tell you some wild stories about the galleries I always visited when I traveled with IBM. And they do some weird things, and realistic work has kind of come back. They had a photorealism period there. Remember that 20, 30 years ago? And people started putting hairs on dogs, painting the hair details and things like that. And realism came back again. And a lot of good landscapes is good, I think. Right now, Eastern is... I met a gal from the alumni department at Eastern over at my son's house. My son has 10 or 12 in his house. My paintings, he's my biggest supporter. Most of my good stuff is over there. So, I haven't heard back from her though. But
That's wonderful. Where do you get your inspirations from?
Well, that's strange too. I see on Facebook these guys paint. And they do a good job, but they will go take a picture and they want to make this painting look exactly like the picture. And that's not what art is about. I've been in the gorge enough. I've never sketched or taken a picture over there for 30 years, I guess. But I can sit down in there and do a cliff line and creek, and you got the Red River Gorge. I throw a pine tree in, or a hemlock tree. And I took those things out of my head and just put them in a composition, and I tell people I've got 3 things I look at, and that's concept, composition, and color. If you look at those 3 things there in painting, you got to have an idea. Oh yeah, I'm going to do a gorge painting. Okay. And then I got to compose it, and then I got to say, well, how am I going to paint this thing? Got to make it springtime, fall. The color comes in, and if you get those 3 basics, then a lot of other things fall in place.
Well, you can kind of look out your door and have a picture of the gorge itself.
Well, you do get to a point where
In
I
fact,
could
you've
paint
got,
any kind of tree just about. If I wanted a scientific illustration of an oak tree, I'd have to go out there and maybe look at one.
right.
Matter of fact, the only picture I would take would be a picture of a rock or a picture of a tree, and people say, you know, not a very nice image. I said, it's not. It was just for that tree. That's the only reason I took that picture, or this rock. I might put it in a painting with some other tree down the road, you know. You can move mountains around as an artist. Some lady in an art thing up in Genuine State Park one time, she had done a nice drawing of a little village scene, a little street, and she had this power line or a telephone pole right in the middle of it. And I said, why did you put this pole in there? You should have left it out. She said, oh, it was there though. It was there. I had to paint that. And you know, that's that mental thing. You can leave things out. That's what I told her. You can move a mountain if you want to.
I see that, and people put the power lines through, and it's like it kills the scene.
Leave the power lines out, my gosh.
It kills the scene. So right now, in looking out, there is something pink blooming on the hillside.
Pink?
Yeah.
Well,
or is that just the leaves of...
That's, let me get the image just a minute here.
See that?
Oh, that's, don't talk about that. That's an invasive species called Japanese spirea. It will take over this property almost like that stupid grass that's going along the highway. That was brought in here by the railroad.
It's called what?
Spirea.
Spirea.
Japanese spirea. It's from Asia.
Okay.
And this grass, by the way, you know, you see it growing along the highway?
Yeah. Yeah.
The railroad brought that in when they built the railroad up through here back in the early 1900s, I guess. And it's spreading all up this valley now. And I've killed some out down there. Got the road department to cut some out. If you don't cut it, this whole place would be smothered in 20, 30 years.
Wow.
Like kudzu.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, this spirea is a little bit in that same family. Only it's a little stubborn, woody kind of thing, and it grows pretty big, and you can't pull it up. You got to cut it down.
Okay.
It's pretty flower, though, you know.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, it. The woods are invasive. You have to continually cut them back.
I told a friend the other day, and he knew that, nature always wins. If you don't keep cutting the grass or the trees, and you know that too, suddenly you realize the trees are this big and you got to hire somebody to cut them.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm on these slopes here on the beside of me, and a tree will naturally lean a little bit. And once it leans to a certain point, the gravity takes hold, and then that starts pulling on it, and suddenly you got to get somebody to come and cut it. It's a big one.
Yeah. Especially with the amount of rains we've had this spring, so many trees have fallen. Yeah.
I cut a swath of trees up in there, you might notice, a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
One of them was actually out over this house right here. Yeah. This huge tree, big limb out there. And get a little nervous that way.
So you also write books.
I wrote a poem when I was 10 or 11, 12 years old. I call it The Awful Mouse. I remember that poem so well, and my sister got it, somebody went to service, and somebody took it home with them, and I never did get to see that again. Nobody knew where it went. Huh. Same way with my bicycle when I came back. I would love to keep my bike. I delivered papers one time for about 2 years, and every day I was on that bike, and that my brother-in-law had sold it when I came home. I tried to find it, I couldn't find it. Yeah. Anyway, that's what happens with life, you know.
So are your books fiction, or?
The only fiction book I have is that one, The Red Mailbox, and that's a story about a Vietnam veteran comes home and gets involved in growing marijuana pot. Okay. And then he got his buddy steals it from him, and it's that kind of story. People, I said, oh, I see you know a lot about growing pot. They look at me with that silly grin. I said, I know. I even talked to state police when I researched this book. And I got a pamphlet of here giving me the history of it in Kentucky, and I have to explain my way out of it. They think I wrote that book because I was the one that was... If you read it, you remember the one, the guy had a snake even, if you remember the story. And my friend up the road here kept snakes, and he was a naturalist at the park, and I worked up there about 4 years, so that's where the snake thing came in. See, put everything together in a little story, just the way you do a painting, maybe. And the real red mailbox just sort of happened. I called it Skokie at one time because they named this fellow Skokie when he got drafted. Huh. But I changed it to the red mailbox when I wrote the story. The box got involved, letters and things.
Yeah, yeah. So tell me about some of your other books and what they're about.
The one I really...
Yeah, grab them, big fan.
I really like this one right here. At least two. This is a small pamphlet book about rock art.
Rock art.
There is a rock found here in the county. It's on private property, and rock hunters pot hunters were chipping it up, people destroying it, and I kept telling them when I found this thing myself before I moved up here. I didn't discover it. Locals knew it was here, but I found it for myself. And when I first walked into it, I said, "There's a face in that image there." And boy, if you don't mind getting in trouble, I'll show you why. Well, nobody believed me. Said, "Al, you're seeing faces in clouds." Then I got involved in pareidolia. It's a mental thing where you see faces in clouds.
Yeah.
I said, "Boys, listen. This is a rock, hard rock carved by somebody sitting there for days. And this is not a face in clouds because a person did it. Nature's doing that other crap out there with the snake. But this is the face that ended up in that rock. And I took all the kind of superfluous stuff out of it. And I'm convinced whoever did it was trying to make it look like a shaman, maybe with paint things around their face. And but you know, it has a hat, beads in the hair, the forelock, beaded forelock, two spiral eyes. That spiral eyes thing has to go back to Central America. That's what got me in trouble. You got a nose, then you had a mouth with a tongue hanging out here. And a gorget was even down where it should be. Everything's where it should be. And I said, you don't ever find a face like that in clouds and wallpaper. This was carved by a person, and I'm convinced out here on that little bluff where it was, they had their little church going, and they would go out and sit around this little rock and had their spiritual thing going.
Yeah.
It was their church.
Yeah.
They finally, believe me, I think, but now what happened? You don't want to hear that, baby. He got involved with Central America and the Mayan. You know, if you look at an old map, Texas, all of Florida, all of California, southern states, over half of them were all the country of Mexico, right?
Yeah.
Well, what happened? We pushed them all back down, and that was what Sam Houston was all about.
Right.
You know, the Alamo.
Right.
And those people haven't forgot that even. They're waving flags in these protests out in California. But scholars don't want to talk about that. And I mentioned it in here even. They banned this book.
What now? Show that book to us.
Oh, it's a Glady cabin.
Okay.
And they banned that for selling because I suggested that perhaps the Mayans influenced this face on this rock up here. Because they were up in northwestern Georgia, the old Creek Indians. That involves the Choctaws and Chickasaws, and there were so many groups in it one time. But because I suggested that in there, some archaeologist or somebody told the Forest Service they couldn't sell it. And I still can't believe that. They would let somebody put out a pornographic book and not say a word about it in some places, but just because I mentioned one little aspect of history they don't like, they banned my book. And I'm proud of that, really. But what we did, a whole group of people renovated this cabin. A fellow named Ron Black came down from Hawking Tech in Ohio and spent a summer down here with 2 students and rebuilt that whole cabin. And that's why they tore out that paneling. It was temporary paneling up in the attic to house loggers at one time. And they renovated this cabin. That's what Glady Cabin is all about. And Hal Rogers was instrumental in getting money to build that really nice Glady Visitor Center over there. And they're having trouble keeping that open because somehow the people that's working just aren't happy with what they're getting paid or something. I don't know what's going on, but they've got some temporary help over there right now. The gal that started this spring left. She's out west in Yellowstone, I think, working now. That kind of thing going on over there, and it's part of Menifee County, and it's a plus for Menifee County.
Right.
But this area is so interesting. I tell people, if you're going to invest in money, between here or the gorge and Cave Run, all that land, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, that's where development will be. You can't put much more here without clogging up the parkway, you know.
Right. Right. So we're sitting here in the middle of the Red River Gorge, basically.
Red River Gorge area.
Area, right. So are there lots of writings on the cliffs in the gorge? Have you found?
Yes, this area Kentucky has probably more petroglyphs than any other state in the southeast, I'm thinking.
Okay.
And a guy just told me the other day we have more arches here than anywhere in the whole world now.
Huh.
We used to have Archers Park out there, and they've found over 1,000 arches, and some of them we didn't used to count an arch unless you could almost walk through it, you know, 5 or 6 foot, and now they're counting smaller arches, and that's what's happening. They've got documenting these arches and come up with over 1,000 now.
Yeah.
We don't have the grandiose kind of arches like at Arches National Park out west.
Right.
But we've got a lot of arches.
Right. Yeah. It the area sure does draw the visitors in, and has really boomed in the last few years.
When I was at IBM, a fellow was born and raised on Big Andy Ridge going over towards St. Helens in Lee County. That's over near Badeville. And he took me over through there to his old home place, and then we were going to go back to the house. He said there was artifacts back there in the shelter. So he drove me up this canyon, and when I came up there, I had no idea that all these cliff lines were around it. So for some reason, cliff lines and topography like this does something to our mental thing, and it just thrilled me going up this canyon here. And I said, wow. And that's when I started coming up here hiking, and I did that painting in '69. It hung in a lodge for many years.
Yeah.
And it's I don't know what it is about it. Just that there's a certain spirituality I think goes with rock shelters, you know.
Right.
When I was a kid in Boyd County near Ashland, there was only one place in the whole county that had a rock shelter, and
Really?
that thrilled us. We would go in and play cowboy and Indians and that kind of thing. Be gone all day. My mom wouldn't say nothing, you know. That was the good old days.
When it was safe. Yeah. I hear.
Turn the kid loose and he'd gone for 3 or 4 hours and you didn't worry about it. He'd come back when he got hungry, you know.
Yeah. So what are you working on these days?
Well, I'm working on that last book, which we're laying out right now, and I've got about 50 poems in that, and almost 100 different short essays. It'll be a little bigger than this book, but it's an accumulation of poems I've written for just that awful mouse poem, you know. That was that other fella coming, wasn't it? My friend?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, he's parked over there.
Okay.
Oh. But that's what, that's my last book, though. I've drove myself crazy putting it together. And friends of mine are laying it out for me, and with illustrations and things.
Oh, good.
And I'm also having a problem in my eyes. I got MD going on in both eyes.
Oh, dear.
Degeneration.
Yes.
One, I can't see detail with this one. I can see you just perfect, but if I look straight at you, you got a distorted face. So if I close and get this good eye, you're okay again. If I lose this eye, I won't be able to drive properly.
Are you receiving shots in the eyes?
Nothing they can do for this dry MD.
It's a dry MD.
Wet and a dry, and they can give you a shot for the wet.
Oh, okay.
But it advances more faster, you know. And this is slower. I'm taking all kinds of eye supplements. I might be wasting money on some, but I've taken eye supplements.
Okay.
It's maybe give me another year where I won't have to
Well, I hope you do.
beg to
Yeah.
have somebody take me down the road and get a coffee or something.
I hope not. I hope not. So,
Well,
have you received any special recognitions for any of your work, your creations over the years?
yeah, that's one reason I met with a gal from the alumni people in UK.
Oh, okay.
When I was there, right after I left, they let me. Tommy Cohn was the art teacher, and Dean Gatwood was ceramic teacher. I never fit those two guys, and they influenced me. They were in the art department, and I had a show of my work a couple of years after I left college, and they got, yeah, okay, come on now, put some work over here. Then later on, I kept wanting to go back over there, and of course those fellows died, and that's what happens when you live to be so old. And I was just disappointed. There's a long story that I don't know whether I want to tell it or not, but
It will be. This is being recorded.
Well,
so
it's not bad. It's not bad because the librarian, head librarian, Marcia Myers, her name at Eastern, bought one of my paintings, and she liked it, and she got me acquainted with me, and she talked, and she said, "You ought to come over, Al, and I'll get you have supper. I'll have lunch with Dr. So and So in the art department." I said, "Oh, that'd be great. You know, I wanted to meet with one of those art professors." So we went up to one of those, I don't know, it was Denny's or something in Richmond, and to go back a little bit, there was a good friend of mine in Winchester, had a little coffee shop. He and his sister, Louis Beckett, and he's a nice guy, but he was he was in the closet at the time. Put him that way. He never got married, of course, and he finally came out of the closet and started painting and doing things in Lexington. But I knew him, so I went to this luncheon with Marcia and this. I won't even mention his name. He was one of those doctors. Matter of fact, I forgot exactly his name, so I won't mention it. And we were sitting there talking, and then I finally had to break the ice. I said, "Well, Dr. Smith," I'll say, "what's happening in the art world?" And he said, well, we had this fellow come in to class the other day, and he had a thong on and had oil on his body, and he was rubbing mud all over his body and quoting poetry." And I said, "I know Louis Beckett." But I knew who he was talking about immediately. And I swear to God, his face turned red and he just clammed up. And I realized, well, I've ruined the whole thing here. And I never heard another word from him. And it's kind of sad, but I did it to myself in a way. But I was being honest, you know.
right.
And Louis, unfortunately, passed away about 4, 5, 6 years ago. And I like Louis. He was a nice guy. That was what was the question? That was the answer to what you got me into
I
there.
don't know. Well, my next question is like, are there special stories you'd like to share with us? And I think you just shared one.
Well, I thought of one a while ago, and I've got past it now. I don't remember what it was. We were talking about several things.
Yeah. Okay.
But what would happen when I traveled for IBM trying to find the right lens with that microfiche, what we were trying to do. And I went to New York. I was up there 4 or 5 times, but not on that. And I went to Chicago and went to Miami and Atlanta. But every time I'd go to a big city with the boys, they would go down and have beer after the work day, and I would find me a museum. I'd go to Museum of Modern Art and Whitney Museum in New York City. I went to both those. I never went to the Guggenheim, and I always regretted that. But there, and the Art Institute in Chicago was where I saw Van Gogh originals, for instance. And I'd get up close and I'd look at brushwork and that kind of stuff. And I'd come back home though, and nothing in Lexington. I think they had one old framing shop, and nothing much was going on art-wise. But I lost my point of that story, I guess.
Okay.
You asked that question again, didn't you?
It's about special stories, yeah. Yeah. Where do you see
Well,
yourself going next in your creative endeavors?
not much more than where I am now. To me, to be as old as I am, I'm not interested in going out and finding art shows and promoting myself. It wears me out, for one thing.
Right.
I'd rather stay here and just paint a nice painting and leave behind people that enjoy art, I guess, or landscape.
Right.
That one in there is a picture of this face. I've got this. I did about 8 or 10 paintings with this face in it, and one of them is in there. I brought it home to look at. If you want to look at it later.
Yeah, we'll take some shots here.
I lay it down over here, and you might have noticed I just sling the paint on it like a Jackson Pollock thing, and get a background going. Then I put my paint in a little squeeze bottle, and I drew this face in that paint. And then I ended up with that painting in there.
Okay.
I can go get it right quick if you want to.
We'll get up and we'll take some pictures here in just a few minutes on that.
And that one is my favorite. I ended up that almost looks patriotic. It was kind of red, white, and blue paint color in it, and it just turned. Out of that whole bunch, I sold all of them, by the way, except this one. Well, I've got 2 of them, and my son has one. But I could still paint some more, and actually, I did it out of rebellion. That's about when those people in the museum in Clay City said, "You're seeing faces in clouds, Al." And I said, "I'm going to paint 100 paintings of this face if I have to, and the whole world will know. I want them to know that there's a face in that rock." And that's what inspired me to do all those paintings of that particular.
So is that rock
subject.
still there? Has it been protected?
Yeah, they finally moved it down to the museum
okay.
in Clay City. And you can go down and look at it.
The Red River Museum.
And one guy told me he was supposedly he was an author doing something, and I put a program on at Westerville, Ohio one time with the Historical Society, and I talked about it, and he said, "Well, it looks like a face, but it's probably a map." And it's that kind of crap I ran into. And I said, "Well, I've never seen a map in this thing."
Well, isn't artwork subject to each person's interpretation?
I found out that if you're not talented in maybe in art and creating images and creating anything really, if you're not a creative person, there's many people would look at that and they couldn't see that face. So, well, I don't see it. And I pointed out that's when I took superfluous stuff away from it so they'd see what the face was.
Right.
The other got mixed up and they didn't have the mental ability to separate that mentally and see the face in that other cluttered thing.
Okay.
Well, here's a rubbing. How it looks. That's a rubbing.
That's
put a
rubbing
paper on
of the...
with a pencil and do a rubbing like you do it on a tombstone.
Yeah, yeah.
And in this image is that face. I didn't change anything. I just took some things away from it, so they'd see the face, and that's what this was about, But I got in trouble with it.
All right. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us?
I don't know. The only thing that I can complain about really is the fact that they won't talk about what they did. So much of our history is not told because it's political. It's like, the Trail of Tears thing, for instance.
Yes.
This gets involved in that because we ran all those Indians or Native Americans and indigenous people west as far as you could. We couldn't find any of them, most of them, but they hid out in the mountains. And the fact that you can't tell the truth about a lot of things kind of upsets me yet. And we should be able to tell the truth to our young people. But politics prevents that.
Yeah, I think we're going through that right now, big time. Yeah.
Well, it's just disappointing, really.
Yes.
And I remember when I was doing research on that, there was an old, I think he was one of the Creek Indians, and he was 100, 101, and he said at the time he remembered when they were having to leave. They were going to round them up, and he said, we may have to go north and hide out. There's people up north. And I said, yeah, they came to the Red River Gorge maybe, you know, and that upset people. Well, wait a minute. We're not too far from northern Tennessee because they are evidence of Mayan influence in Tennessee. There's a place down there called Black Rock. And there's stone walls down there. The Cherokee didn't build stone walls. The other Indians didn't either, but the Mayans did. And that one program of Scott Walters, remember he had that program? He more or less proved that that blue color used on buildings in Teotihuacan, Mexico, old Mexico City, the Mayans and Aztecs, that blue actually came from the mountain area. He proved that. And guess what happened to him? Maybe I should tell this too, but he had this thing, great thing, and he was doing this thing, and he joined the Masonic order, or some secret order, and I think they shut him up. His program, he never came back. He'll have him every now and then. So he got into some other group that said, Mom, you can't talk about that, you know. No, don't mention that again. But that color, he proved, they wouldn't let him in. The Forest Service blocked him out.
Wow.
Because there's a whole archaeological evidence down there on that mountain. And he got a LiDAR in an airplane and flew over it and found those walls. And I forgot how he got a sample somehow and proved that color blue on those buildings in Mexico came from Georgia. And there's a Creek migration legend of the early Creeks lived on the slopes of Orizaba volcano. I think it's the second or third largest volcano in the world. It was erupting, and that's one reason though a lot of those came north, because that thing erupted 3 or 4 times over from somewhere around 1000, 1100, 1200 AD. But this old man, they came out of, there's a migration legend, I'll get back to what I was going to say, was in a museum in Edo, Georgia, and they still have it down in the museum, but it tells about those people moving up here, and they moved into Georgia and northwest Georgia. The Creeks did, early Creeks Indians. And they got split up into the Muskogee and, you know, Choctaw and Chickasaw and everything else, 100 ever other things. His mother, I get this information from a fellow named Richard Thornton. He's a architect and planner, city planner, but he's a Creek Indian. His mother was Mayan, who was raised in Florida. Think about that. She was Mayan. And he's half Mayan, I guess, or something like that. And he's told about that legend. He actually found that legend. He knew it existed. The British recorded that from one of those princesses of the Creek at the time, who was the upper controlling people, had recorded it for the British, and he went to King in England now, Charles.
Yeah.
King Charles is very interested in that and UFOs and things. He mentioned that. Thornton did. And the king found that thing in an old castle over there somewhere, and they actually made a copy of it for Thornton to put in that museum down there. And a little thing to that, I can add to that we have an archaeological weekend we used to have every year.
September, isn't it?
Lady, and there was a lady there about 3 years back. She was an archaeologist, and I went up to her table to talk to her, and I asked her where she's from. She said, Alabama. And I said, oh, yeah, Alabama is a Creek Indian word. That's where the state of Alabama was named. And she said, they ought to do something to that son of a gun. They ought to get rid of him. And I didn't even mention Thornton. She hated Thornton because he's telling the truth about the migrations up from Central America up in. They lived here a long time before Columbus. That'd be the end of my story on that. But that's the thing I got into with this book. I said I was interested in I was just saying things that I found out, and you can't talk about that, Al. That's disappointing.
Censorship.
Yeah, and it goes on in a lot of things.
That is.
We never know the truth.